Welcome back to the Menlo Circus Club Cooking Essentials class. And today we are coming to you live, previously live from my backyard. Today we're going to do a little bit of grilling. I've lit the fire, started the gas, family's coming over. I've got some beautiful meat marinated. But really, it's all about not the marinade you put on the meat, but how you cook the meat. Quick shout out today to Dirk. I miss you. Dirk's not here today. My beautiful wife Amanda is filming. Usually Dirk throws two fingers up in front of the camera. You want to do that for us? No? No. And shout out to Robin. So my fire's lit. And while we're waiting for that to come up, I want to talk about grilling. I want to talk about the technique of grilling. I want to talk about types of grills. This is more of a grill primer. We're going to focus more on technique than we are on actual recipes and preparations or ingredients. Like I said, this is more of a grill primer. If I offend you because I'm telling you basic stuff, I apologize now, but I really want to start off at a base and move up from there because I think it's really essential that we completely understand what we're doing here. So let's talk about types of grills. There's gas grills, which you see, I have one over here. There's wood-fired grills, and there's pellet grills. So we're not going to get into pellet grills because those are more of a hybrid smoker, and that's a whole completely different episode. Gas. What are the benefits of it? Well, it's cleaner for the environment, first of all. It's less messy. You don't have to get your hands all black. And it's more controllable. It's easier to use. I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like a great win. So what do you lose with gas? Really, you lose this. You lose the smoke. You lose the flavor. You essentially lose the essence of what barbecue is. Now, when I say barbecue, what we're doing here is not barbecuing. This is grilling. But the essence of barbecuing, the essence of grilling is all about the smoke. That's the flavor you want. That's the flavor that you're trying to capture. And that really is essentially what it's all about. You can go either way. You get home on a Wednesday night, you just got off work. I want to grill some steaks really quick. Gas is the way to go. Hands down. Fire it up. Wait 15, 20 minutes for it to come up to temp. Throw your steaks on. Well, oil, there's more involved than that. Throw your steaks on and go. Turn the gas off. Walk away. There's no dishes to do. There's no pots and pans to scrub. It's the way to go. But really, a Sunday afternoon with the family in the backyard, get the mesquite. Get the hickory. Even get the charcoal. You're going to notice the flavor in your food. Speaking of hickory, mesquite, and charcoal, let's talk about fuel sources if you're using wood. You notice here, this is mesquite. Charcoal is fantastic. You can buy it at the store. It's relatively cleaner to use. And I mean, when I say cleaner, I mean getting your hands dirty. It's not like mesquite. Mesquite is a mess. Makes your hands all black. You got to wash your hands 300 times. Why do I like mesquite? Mesquite burns really, really hot. I think it has a good, not overly acrid flavor to it. And it's fairly easy to light. Problem with mesquite, it takes a long time to actually get to charcoal stage. To get to red coal charcoal stage, which is what you want to be grilling on. And it's very temperamental, as you can see. It went from going off to now it's just hanging out. Grilling over wood, oak. Oak is great as far as really high temperature, long burn, not a lot of flavor. When I'm grilling at home, I will usually run mesquite because that's where I get a lot of the heat from. But then I'll use the softer fruit woods like cherry, apple, maple, and even hickory to throw on there just to get some of that flavor in there. So we've gone over types of grills, gas versus wood or charcoal. We've gone over different fuels for your grill. Personally, like I said, I like mesquite with a mix of apple sometimes. The problem with fruit woods is they burn a lot faster. So you just need a little bit, or even some wood chips in there. So now we're going to talk about the grill itself. So, and how to use it, really. So when you think about this grill, I want you to think about it not as a grill, but I want you to think of it as a stove and an oven or a broiler, interchangeable. How is it similar to a stove? So you've got very high direct heat, a saute pan, for example, and that's just cooking one side of whatever you put in there. So essentially, it's like a stove. The way it's different is it's exposed dry heat, which what we previously talked about, the difference between dry heat and moist heat. So it's very, very aggressive. Now, how is it like an oven? Well, an oven uses indirect heat. So we have this heat in here, and we close the lid, and now we're filling the entire cavity of the grill with heat. And that's what indirect heat is. The problem with a grill or with grilling, it would be great if, just like your oven, you could put a piece of meat on the grill, close the lid, walk away. But that's not really how it works, because the bottom of that meat is going to burn. So as much as we can make it like an oven, really it's closer to a broiler. Your oven with the top set on high. You put something in there. Yeah, it's great for melting cheese, but I don't know if I'd want to cook a piece of meat like that. So how do we get around that? How do we make it more like an oven? Because that direct heat is fine, but it's only fine for short periods of time. So what we can do is, and we'll talk about gas and we'll talk about wood fire. What you can do is, in that grill, let's say I'm cooking a tri-tip and I'm using charcoal, and in a Weber grill. All grills are completely different, so I'm going to be very specific about this. I am going to align my charcoal around the outside of the grill, and I'm going to do the majority of my cooking in the center of the grill. And what that's going to do, it's going to create a convection current in that Weber grill. That's why they're round. They're designed that way. My mom's funny. My mom cooks tri-tip all the time. I grew up on tri-tip. It's what we eat when I go home. 22 pieces of charcoal on each side of the grill. Less than that is not enough. More than that is too much. It's always got to be 22 on both sides of the grill. And I have witnesses. So in this grill, this wood grill, how are we going to create that oven effect, that indirect heat? Because we've already determined that indirect heat with direct heat combined doesn't work. What I would do, I would move the majority of my briquettes, the majority of my mesquite, the majority of my charcoal over to one side. And I would create a hot side and a cooler side. Now, to cook the outside of that meat, to get that Maillard reaction, to get that char, to get that crust, I'm going to do the majority of that on the hot side of the grill. You work in a restaurant, a good grill cook is always going to have a hot side and a cooler side, because steaks don't always cook the same speed. You want to be able to get those beautiful marks on there, get that crust on there, and then finish it on the cooler side. We're going to do the same thing here. Now, briquettes, fuel, one side, the other side is your cooler side of the grill. What about gas? This is the beautiful part of gas. I turned this gas grill on earlier. It's about 400 degrees. Ideally, we'd get it down to 300 to 350. But with gas, all I've got to do is turn off part of the grill. And so I have one burner going, and the rest of the grill, there's no flame. So this entire part of the grill just became an oven. I'm going to demonstrate that. We're going to cook a couple of things today and show you how each one of those heat patterns works. We're going to be cooking a little bit of skirt steak. That's going to be a great demonstration of the uses of just a hot grill. We're not going to worry about the indirect heat. This is just going to be heat, heat, heat. It's a nice thin steak. Other steaks or other types of meat you would use the same application for really are going to be thinner cuts. Anything more than an inch, inch and a half, I would use the direct heat and then the indirect heat. I'm also going to be cooking a chicken breast because chicken breasts are good. And honestly, they're really, really hard to grill well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And then to finish, to show the beauty of indirect heat on a grill, we're going to cook a tri-tip. And I'm going to feed my family. So this is part one of grilling in my backyard. Next week on part two, we're going to be talking about vegetables. And I'm going to show you how to do an entire meal just on your grill. So we're still waiting for our grill to heat up. Let's talk about marinades. One of the best parts about working with a grill is you really don't have to worry about what kind of marinade you use. Any type of marinade works. Chunky marinades, thin marinades, saucy base marinades like a yogurt marinade. It's really not an issue. You can go simple or you can go as complicated as you like. One thing to note, I generally will marinate my whatever meat I'm using about 18 to 24 hours in advance, whether it be chicken or beef, unless there's an acid in there. We've talked about that. There's an acid in there just a couple hours prior. When I marinate it, I'll always try to make sure there's a little bit of extra virgin olive oil in there because we talked last time or a couple weeks ago about how extra virgin olive oil is the only olive oil in the world who has a fat-soluble water molecule and a water-soluble molecule. So it really gets in there, binds, and creates moisture. The other thing is salt. If there's salt in your marinade, take it out. If you have a recipe that has salt in the marinade and really it's going to be a long marinade time, take the salt out because what salt does when it gets in contact with anything organic is it actually starts to, through osmosis, pull water out of the cell walls and it dries the meat out. I usually season my meat about 20 to 30 minutes out to just kind of let it melt down, let it absorb. Unless I'm doing traditional Southern style barbecue, and that's a 3-day process. So that's it on marinades. Grilling is great. You can do whatever you want, and it's all going to be delicious. So, okay, so it took some time, but our fire has, our mosquitoes finally gone to coal. So how do we know when our grill is ready? So for direct grilling, what you're gonna do, and I showed you this a couple weeks ago. Put your hand over that grill. You shouldn't be able to hold it on there for more than 5 seconds. I know. My hands, they're not as sensitive as most. But another good way to check is to take a rag and dip in a little bit of oil. And we're gonna run that over the grill. We're gonna see that oil should smoke off right away. If it doesn't, if you don't see smoke, it's not ready. So I've cleaned my grill. I just seasoned it. Very, very important. My coals are ready. Really quick, let's talk about the marinade on my meat. It changes every time. It's always going to be different. I don't really have a recipe. It's whatever I'm feeling like that day. This marinade, it's a little bit of garlic powder, some onion powder, some cracked pepper, some fresh thyme, extra virgin olive oil, and a little bit of chili powder and Spanish smoked paprika. So we're gonna start off by grilling the skirt steak. Now, skirt steak, very thin steak. You want really high heat, both sides. It's gonna grill very fast. How do we know when it's done? I'm always talking about it, but always have a thermometer. It's really, really hard with skirt because it is so thin to get that thermometer in the right place. So our grill is super hot. You can see this section of our grill is actually starting to go white. That means it's really hot. And we're gonna take our skirt, we're just gonna throw it directly on there. Now what happens if your grill isn't hot enough? The meat's still gonna cook. It's still safe. You're just not gonna get that char on the outside. You're not gonna get that flavor on the outside. So we're gonna let it just char for a couple of minutes. We'll keep checking it. Make sure it's not burning. If it does start to burn, what do? Move it to a cooler part of the grill. That's obviously too hot for what you're doing. So just move it to a cooler part. Take a look at it. Got a little bit of char on there. I'm gonna give it a nice turn because cross marks on meat, they look good. And that's really the only reason we do it. There's no other reason for it other than it's attractive. So we're gonna let this grill for a couple minutes and then we'll flip it. We'll check it. All right, so how's that steak looking? Oh, we've got some beautiful color on there. Nice caramelization. It's got a little bit of char, but not too much. We're just gonna flip it over on the same spot and let it keep cooking. It's probably gonna take 3 minutes on each side. It's really hard to say. It depends on how thick the skirt steak is. If you've noticed, I moved some of my coals mostly to one side so I really get that hot spot. Now we're gonna do this all direct. That means really high heat on the outside. Now, if you have a slightly thicker piece of skirt steak and you're worried about it getting too hot and you've tried moving it around, what does closing the top of the grill do? So right now, I'm still getting that direct heat, but now I'm creating some indirect heat. The skirt steak was really thick. It wasn't cooking the way I wanted to. I'm fixing the problem. I know from that heat source, from the other side, how fast that skirt steak is gonna cook on the other side. It's actually gonna take a little bit longer just because I am essentially depriving my fire of oxygen, not starving it, depriving it. So I've cut down the amount of oxygen going to that flame, which means it's gonna burn at a slightly lower temperature. Only if your steak is thick, maybe for a New York, a ribeye, anything under 1.5 inches, you probably won't need to go there. So, hit both sides of our steak. A little bit of char. I like a little bit of char on my steak. Some people don't. So we're gonna temp it out. So what is the temp we're looking for? That would be my son. He says the temp we're looking for is So I don't know. I don't know what temperature that is. So I'm gonna say 120, 125, and then we're gonna let it rest. So resting meat. Remember, take your meat off, put on a roasting rack. In that heat process, so the muscle fibers, which I'm always talking about muscle fibers, so those muscle fibers soften up, they're not contracted anymore, and the meat is easier to eat. So we're gonna move on to our chicken now. Just clean our grill. Always clean your grill with a brush between applications. And every time you put something new on your grill, season it. Rag, really careful with this. if you are scared or not scared, if you are cautious, another way to do it. So with the chicken, oh, lost my towel. Quite all right. With the chicken skin doesn't like super high heat. It likes medium high heat. So we're gonna find an area, and you don't need to put your hand directly down. Find a cooler area of the grill. We're gonna take our chicken breast. We're just gonna lay it there. Now, we're gonna use a combination of direct and indirect on this. So what I've done, because we are grilling so much meat today, what I've done is I've got my gas grill going. So this is gonna be my indirect heat. Direct heat here, we get that flavor, we get that smoke. Indirect here. If you're just doing 4 chicken breasts, put them on the grill, get a nice mark, move them to the edge or to the middle, depending on where you have your coal base at. Close the lid and just keep an eye on them. We're just doing 1 for now. We're gonna see how it's going. It's doing great. Chicken's really hard to grill well. I'm not gonna lie, chicken with the skin on is really hard to grill well. It's a whole new set of rules. The biggest thing, you want crispy, you want golden brown chicken, but you don't want burnt. We're gonna take a look at where we're at. You see, the skin is starting to render off. It's starting to get crispy. It's gonna tell me where my hot spots are at. You see it's right there, which was this area. That area is a little bit hotter. So we're just gonna kind of move it around. Keep it close to that heat point, but not too close. We're gonna let it go for a couple of minutes. So I took my meat off the grill, but I had all this other stuff that I had to cook. And my meat got cold. I'm always gonna say cook your meat first, take care of everything else later, unless, and that's just for grilling, if you're just grilling a little bit of stuff. Why? Why is that? Because I can take this tray, let's say my meat's cold, and I can slide it in to my grill 1, 2, 3 minutes just to get that meat hot without overcooking. Now, how do you know if your meat's warm enough? Take your finger, put it on there, and it should feel fairly warm. It shouldn't feel hot. Oh, chicken skin rendering. Look. It burnt. It happens. The rest of my skin is absolutely beautiful. Scrape that off. And so now, if you remember way back to the first episode, we're gonna kiss that other side of the chicken. Then we're going to move it to our indirect heat. A little bit of color on there, just a little bit. We're gonna move it over here, and we're gonna let it continue to cook on that side. We'll check it in about 5 minutes. You remind me. So now on to the tri-tip. It's a slightly bigger piece of meat. I'm gonna spread my coals out just a little bit more. Once again, grill always. I always tell my cooks, if you have a second, clean your grill. I'll clean your grill whenever you can. A cleaner grill is just going to make better food. It's going to be easier to work with. Clean it before you fire it up. Clean it after you fire it up. And after you clean it, and every 5 minutes that it's hot but not in use, season it, because all you're doing is making that cast iron non-stick. So I'm gonna take my tri-tip. What we're gonna do, we're gonna throw it directly on there. Now I could close the lid at this point, but I'm cheating. I'm using my indirect heat. So I'm just gonna let this caramelize and caramelize and caramelize. Probably take 4 to 5 minutes, depending on the heat source, maybe upwards. If you want it to take a little bit longer, close the lid. My biggest concern with doing it this way is that you're going to get more color on the outside, and it's not going to cook through even if you do it on both sides, because really when it comes to finishing with indirect heat, you want a lower temperature. We've talked about this before. 300 degrees is kind of preferred, even 250, that just takes a really long time because you want that meat to slowly cook from the outside in. If you're blasting it on high heat for longer periods of time, what you're gonna get is you're gonna get layers of doneness. You're gonna get mid-rare. Well, you may have mid-rare in the middle, but you're gonna have well done for a 1/4 inch along the outside. Then it's gonna be medium well inside there. Really what you wanna shoot for is a nice crust on the outside and mid-rare all the way through. That's why I'm not a fan of this technique. I would rather mark my meat and then finish it at a slower temp. I just think you get a better product. You take a look at it. You're getting some color on there. Closing that lid slowed down that heat process. I'm just gonna double check my chicken. Make sure it's doing all right. I'm gonna flip it back on the skin side. So I know that grill's still a little hot. And we'll check it in a couple minutes. Chicken breast is gonna take 12 to 16 minutes. So we've got some good color on one side. We flipped it. We're gonna check our color on the other side. If you wanna get crazy, you can go even further and try to sear the short side. You know, because really color is flavor. That's what it all comes down to. And that would be my son. I'm not really sure what he's doing over there. I think he likes tri-tip. Not really. He doesn't eat anything but buttered pasta and French fries. So we're gonna take it from here and move it to a cooler part of the grill, almost a cold part of the grill, and then we would close it. For time's sake, for my sake, I'm gonna take it from the direct heat and I'm gonna put it on some indirect heat and I'm gonna finish it in here. And while we're doing that, check the temperature of our chicken. You want this chicken breast, 145, 150. Let it come up a few more degrees after we rest it. Right now it's at 108. It seems a little on the cooler side. So while my tri-tip is going, I'm actually going to move it kind of to a hotter spot. Play with the heat. Play with the heat. Also, if you have a thermometer on your grill, great option. You can buy aftermarket thermometers. That basically it's just a probe that you lead in there. That's going to be really helpful. And remember, try to keep this around 250 to 350 if you have a thermometer or an aftermarket thermometer. So we're going to let those cook. We'll be back in a few. Okay, so 300 degrees, 250, 350, somewhere in that range if you can nail it. If not, it's going to be perfectly fine. It's still going to be delicious. Temp my chicken out. Chicken's about 150 degrees. I kept flipping it back and forth, playing with the skin. Seeing if I can get the skin crispier. 150 degrees, I'm going to take that off, put it on a wire rack, and I'm going to let it rest for about 7 or 8 minutes. My tri-tip, I got some beautiful char on the outside. Picked it up to about 125. You can see there's different thicknesses on here. So down here, 128, 130. Up here in the thick section, it's probably around 125, 126. You're gonna let it rest for a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes. Just once again, let those protein strands relax. Let them soak up some more of that moisture. And then we're gonna slice. I really just wanna take a minute. We'll talk about slicing meat and we'll go from there. All right, so we've grilled our meat. We've Finish it on the grill. Really, grilling is all about two things. Getting nice color on the outside of that meat and not overcooking it. So however you get there, be creative. It's all going to be delicious. You know, take your time. Enjoy the process. Grilling is such a process. Enjoy time with family. Crazy kids. I want to take a minute and I just want to talk about slicing meat because we grilled skirt steak and we grilled tri-tip, and those two meats need to be sliced. I just want to talk about why I say that really quick. So I'm always talking about the strands, the protein strands in meat, and tri-tip and skirt steak are two great examples of protein strands. You can actually pull it apart and you see the protein fibers in there. Those are actually really chewy. So we want to break those protein strands up a little bit. So I would take this skirt steak, I'd cut it in half, and then you always want to slice perpendicular to your protein strands. Now, as I'm feeling this meat, you see, it's sat for a while, so it's a little over. But as I'm feeling this meat, I'm noticing it's a little cold. Once again, if your meat is cold, put that sheet tray back on the grill just for a minute or two, and you're good to go.
Okay, Chef.
Yeah?
Does it need to be on a sheet tray?
You can't throw it directly on the grill. I think it's better to have it on a sheet tray on a roasting rack, but if you just want to give it a quick turn on the grill to kind of warm that outside, because the inside is still going to be warm the thicker the piece of meat. So on this tri-tip is really strange because you have, if you look at it, you have meat strands running this way that you can see right here. You see the lines? That's my little monkey. And you have meat strands running this way. So when I butcher a tri-tip, what I'll do is I'll separate these two pieces out. And I'll cut this one perpendicular. Perpendicular to that meat. And then for this other piece, I'll actually cut it in this direction. And that'll give me what I want. And that's nicely cooked. That's nicely cooked. Beautiful color. Now a chicken is a smaller animal. You're not going to get those overly developed protein strands, but if I'm cutting a chicken breast, I'll just give it a nice little slice. We got crispy skin. We got moist interior. I mean, it's beautifully, beautifully done. So, welcome to my backyard. That is our Grilling from My Backyard session 1. We talked about meat. Next week, we're going to talk about vegetables and how to create an entire menu on the grill that doesn't take too much time. If you have any questions, michela@menlocircusclub.com. Please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And have a great day.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week.